Hey everybody, and welcome here to another whatever you want to call this of disgruntled here on Three Clicks Media. I felt compelled today to have a discussion about how veterans are contributing to this current culture war that we find ourselves in. I was approached by somebody not long ago with this question about how do you think, and this is a person apparently that watches our content here on Three Clicks, and just straight out asked me, how do you think veterans are contributing to the culture war? And of course, I think depending on the person you're having the conversation with, that this could become a very interesting conversation, but it has the opportunity to become a very dismal conversation, but an opportunity nonetheless. So, of course, you always take these opportunities. And so, I guess I didn't really know how to approach it, right? I mean, because there's a lot of narratives about what the current culture war even is. You know, some people will say, well, it's this issue on like fertility and abortion and uh, the trans movement and LGBTQ plus and all this other stuff. And then there's all this other things about things going on currently in our system. I think the big thing right now is all these tariffs, and stock market is crashing and crypto is going down the tubes, and everyone's freaking out about all kinds of things. And we got the war in the Ukraine, and not everyone, but there's many people out there that are being very loud about the fact that they hate President Trump, they hate Elon Musk, they hate Tesla, they hate this, they hate that, and things are burning and being vandalized and damaged. And now we're starting to see violence. People are starting to attack each other over all of these things. And so the discussion became pretty interesting, because my opinion about how veterans contribute to the culture war, I think, depends on the person. I think it's the same as anybody else who's involved in the conflict, right? I don't know that veterans are on an even playing field, and that you can classify them all as and I don't know how you classify anybody as just taking one stance for one group of people. Although I bet there's some interesting narratives out there about which groups of people stand for what, but we won't get into all that right now. That's probably a whole nother show. But what I think is interesting is that the person that approached me, when I asked them, let's take some arbitrary veteran, and what does their experience look like, and what side are they on, what side of this culture war are they on, which issues are most important to them, which issues are they willing to plant their flag on, and which hill are they willing to die on for what issue. Because I think that, you know, we have all these, for example, January 6th was a big one, right? There were a lot of veterans allegedly involved in storming the Capitol, as they say. I think they were ushered in. It looked to me as if they were ushered through the building, as if they were being given a tour, but that's neither here nor there. But what is that? What are those people's experience look like? Because I think that we also have to understand that every veteran's military experience is different. Not everybody serves in a combat area. Not everybody serves in the same branch. Not everyone does the same job. Not everyone is trained the same way. Not everybody has the same experience. And furthermore, the United States military, out of every organization that's known to this country, no matter government or not, the United States military is the biggest melting pot, the club of the biggest melting pot of any other club, in my opinion, than any other organization in our country, for sure. I mean, there's something like 86 or 88 religions recognized. There are soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, Coast Guard. I don't know what they call the Coast Guard people. I don't know if are they sailors also, of every cultural background. And so it's hard to pigeonhole veterans in one way or another. You start to get a little more streamlined. Maybe you start to find veterans with a lot more in common when you start kind of cherry picking some of these issues, right? So if we were going to take veterans who were deployed to a forward area during the global war on terror, so Iraq, Afghanistan, that type of thing, and I believe you can also put the Gulf War guys in there. I think they lumped them in with the GWAT folks also, maybe not. What does their experience look like? Because their experience is going to be a lot different from the Vietnam veterans who were thinking they were going to graduate high school, go to work in the local auto garage with their buddy and have some beers at night, fix some cars, live a good, honest life, make a good, honest paycheck. Instead, they got plucked out of their neighborhoods and sent to Vietnam. And life looked a lot different for them. So now we have vast differences, and those people are going to have vast different views. And so in this war on this culture war that we're fighting, these two groups of veterans may come together on a lot of things, but maybe not. We don't know. I don't believe it's something you can rely on. But when we start talking about the global war on terrorism, veterans, things like their reintegration cycle, right? They think that plays into the way that people navigate the next number of years of their lives. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I can kind of understand where they're coming from. Imagine, if you will, you've been fighting, or you've been deployed. Maybe you haven't been fighting, but you've been deployed to Baghdad, or you were in somewhere in Afghanistan. You were there for a year. You were gone for 16 months or 18 months or 12 months or whatever your deployment cycle was. And you come home, and there's all this training planned for you. There's all these ideas about how you're going to come back home. There's all these things they're going to tell you, and these materials they're going to give you to read, and these techniques they're going to want you to try, and places they're going to want you to go, and people they're going to want you to talk to. And the idea is that this is going to help make your transition home as streamlined as possible. Well, I think that for a lot of guys, if you were to ask them and they were truthful with you, I think a lot of guys would tell you that whole program was one big, healthy piece of shit. How many soldiers do you think between the ages of 19 or 20 and 35 to 40 are listening to all these people talk at them? How about any soldiers at all, even if they're 60 years old? The sergeant majors and the first sergeants and some of these officers, they're not listening. Shit, they might not even be there. They just sign and leave. That whole process, in my opinion, although it was great in theory, I don't think that it was very well orchestrated. I think that you would find more veterans of the global war on terrorism, if you were to ask them about their process to returning home, I think that they would tell you. I don't know what they talked about. I have no idea. I think that they would tell you, I listened to the VA people so I could apply for a disability if that applies to them. And then I was listening for when I was going to get to go home. Other than that, I didn't give a shit. I want to see my kids. I want to see my wife. I want to drive my truck. I want to see my buddies. I want to have a beer with my dad. I want whatever they need or want. That's what they're thinking about. And so that process helps them to decide how they're going to move forward, because there were a lot of things that were talked about in reintegration, how you're going to be treated, and the things that you're going to see, and some of the doors that are going to open for you. And I don't know that the people that are feeding this information necessarily understood, at least when we went through it, that we don't care. We don't care about doors that are going to open for us. We want to go home. Us in particular, we had just spent 22 months away from home. I don't care what you have to say about the VA. I don't care what you have to say about, hey, driving's going to be a little tough. So just take it easy, start slow, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's paying attention to that shit. We just came from the deadliest highways in the world at the time. We were driving Humvees. escorting these dudes who had no idea really what the hell was going on, that were driving semi trucks. We were driving down the deadliest highways in the world at the time, the Widowmaker, Route Sword, Route Tampa, right through the downtown Baghdad. We didn't give a shit. Nobody gave a shit about taking some 1 hour or 2 hour class about driving back home. You're not going to tell me nothing until we started driving when we got back home. For some people, it was an issue. So then you move past all that. And some veterans, they say, and I won't even say they say, some veterans do struggle with things such as we know, post-traumatic stress, adjustment disorder, anger, sadness, depression, this, that, the other thing, blah, blah, blah. But the other thing that is not widely talked about in that conversation is that veterans also struggle with moral injury. They struggle with the idea that their moral compass has been damaged. And for some people, it's a pretty tough pill to swallow, because a lot of guys, and maybe I shouldn't speak for a lot of guys, but this is my perception. A lot of guys in the military who are picking MOSs and jobs that are trigger pullers, that are artillery, that are operating heavy equipment that causes damage and deals death. A lot of these guys who are actively engaged in combat, all the way from the most green grunt in the United States Army to the most seasoned special operations guy at the very top of whatever secret group that exists that none of us really know about. I'm sure there's something out there. We all have a moral compass. And when you have been in places and you're forced to operate outside the left and right limit of that moral compass that you've been given, to me, in my opinion, I don't care who you are, it affects you. Maybe you don't show it, maybe you're not willing to admit it, but I believe it affects everybody. Because we talk really highly about these values such as integrity and honor and courage. And sometimes maybe it seems like if I admit that I operated outside of the left and right limit of my moral compass, then maybe I have violated things like integrity. Doing the right thing when nobody's looking. I don't know. It's just an idea. It's something that I've always thought. I don't know that there's very many people who were organically bred to grow into an adult and be extremely deliberate about taking human life and being okay with it. I think it affects everybody. Is it necessary? Yes. Does it need to happen sometimes? Yes, absolutely. But I believe that it affects everybody one way or another. Maybe not now, maybe later. Maybe you never are willing to show it. Maybe you can't. Who knows? Who knows what the answer is, but I believe it affects everybody in one way or another. And so, yes, stick with me, folks. We're still talking about this, how veterans contribute to this war, on this culture war, contribute to the culture war. And I promise that I'm getting to an educated answer here. I'm really not just mumbling and rambling on. I think that we all know. I think we've all heard enough stories, and we've definitely heard me talk for what now? Almost 18 minutes about things that would cause somebody to be pissed off or a little bit angry. But I'm not always 100% sure that it's just veterans. I think that, and I know for sure it's not just veterans, because we see it all the time. We see it in other places, in other news stories. We see it with our own eyes in public when, unfortunately, we end up in places where these things are happening. But I think that we see veterans, maybe now more than ever, taking a stand on things, on issues. Maybe it's just because it's easier now. Maybe it's easier now to be out here on all these social media platforms. Maybe now that we know that we don't always have to be just talking to the wall. We don't have to always just be talking to the air. I mean, this might be Disgruntled on 3 Clicks Media, just might be the smallest underwatched podcast on all of YouTube. But those of you who do watch it, we really appreciate it, because that means somebody's watching. So that means some of our words are getting out, and the things that we think about and the way that we see the world, which is really what we're here to kind of, in my opinion, to put out. You know, Jason and I and the others in the group, we're not like super smart dudes. We're not geniuses by any stretch of the imagination. Are we extremely smart guys? But I believe that we're all grounded. We all have a pretty decent sense of what's going on in the world around us. We all understand what's really important when it comes to our families and our children and our jobs and our friend and our circle and our networks. And so I think that there's value. I think that we have value to add to our community, to other veterans. And then we have ideas for more projects, and we're working on all that stuff. But again, a whole nother, boy, I am really good at getting down goat trails that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. I'm really sorry about that. Let's get back, because we're almost out of time. We've been here for 20 minutes already. Culture war. I think that we see veterans now more taking part in the culture war because culture has kind of given us a little bit louder voice than we used to have. The number of veterans in our communities has grown. As we talked about back during election time, veterans now make up roughly about 11%, maybe almost even 12% now of the nation's population. And so even though it's a very small number, we still have a little bit of power in numbers growing. And I believe that as veterans, as military personnel, that we do see the world in a different way because of the experiences that we've had, whether it was voluntarily or things in the world around us just hit different, if that makes sense. Sometimes you see things and people are having complete and utter meltdowns, and I can look and, you know, you gather as much information as you can, and then you kind of think to yourself, like, this is it? Like, this is what we're melting down about? Is this really that important? And I think there's a lot of people in our country who aren't veterans who also think the same thing. But the difference is that when those types of things are happening, and you'll see one or two, depending on the size of the group, you know, you'll see a small group of veterans maybe off in the corner, off on the side. And none of them look stunned. None of them look pissed. None of them look surprised. And it's because none of it's really all that important. I think you'd probably find similar reactions if you had like a group of police officers around who have been dealing with all this atrocious malarkey that's been going on for the last 5 to 6 years in our country, who have seen some absolute bullshit, because none of it really makes you think that anything's really that big of a deal, because you've seen and you've experienced and you've lived and you've watched things that really are a big deal. You've seen people really lose everything, their house, their family. You've seen despair on their face when they run up to a family member who's dead on the ground. And you see how that affects them. That hits pretty hard. That's a sobering experience. And it's never been my experience, but imagine if you're the one that took that life, which is the experience of many other veterans and or maybe even police, well, not maybe, but for sure police officers. A lot of these guys who stay silent and sit in the back of the room and don't really get too hyper about nothing, they're maybe the guys who had to collect their buddies' parts and put them in a bag to send them home and then keep fighting. These guys are maybe the ones who had to sit on a cot, on a gurney, and look down and see their body blown apart and try to stay calm so everyone else around them doesn't freak out, because the sight of it already is pretty freaky. Veterans know what it's like to be hungry, to be sick at work, to be hungover at work, to be thirsty, to be hot, to be cold, to be tired, to be sore, to miss home, to lose everything, gain everything. We know. Maybe not all of us know everything, but in a small group of veterans, you're going to find a lot of those things in one small group. Is it because we're hard-headed? Maybe. It's because we do stupid shit at times, probably, but we also see the world through different lenses, through different colors. And so when we talk about contributing to a culture war, maybe we contribute a little bit differently, or we're more aggressive and we're more loud. And I would argue sometimes, depending on the person, because also don't get it mistaken. Just because we're veterans doesn't mean we don't have some crazy people too, because we do. Man, we can build up a narrative as far as the eye can see, but we can certainly tear it down. But if there are some issues and you hear veterans screaming from the mountaintops about, and you do a little bit of digging like you do everywhere else for every other issue, and you find that maybe the guy that's screaming from the mountaintops is not so nuts. It's not so crazy. Maybe just because he's a veteran doesn't mean he's freaking nuts. Those might be some things that you want to ask a couple of extra questions about. Maybe you don't buy into it 100%, but maybe you ask some questions. I don't know. Maybe not. But I think that we have been kind of arbitrarily given a little bit louder voice, and we've taken the opportunity to stand the post, to lend our voice, to talk about experiences. The power of story is so damn powerful. It's so strong, and it's so helpful, and it's needed. And I think we're starting to see a little bit more of it now as time goes on. I think that most people would not have any idea, would not have any clue the great feats that some men and women have done for this country. And all of it sitting right in a VFU, in a Legion, under some shade tree in the South. These stories are just sitting in the heads of all these men and women, just waiting for someone to ask them. And so that's how we contribute, in my opinion, especially us older guys. And I'm an old fart. Jason's really old. Ty's old. Trevor's really old. We're all old, but we can lend our voice. We can lend a platform. We can have conversations. We can take stories. We can tell stories. We can put them out. We can do everything that we can. Try to ensure that the story of the veteran in this country never goes away. The story of the veteran in this country is the story of America. It's a large part of the story of America. We can't lose it. Many, many years from now, when all of this polarization is over and this particular culture war is over, whatever side prevails, but many, many years from now, when they look back on all this information, I hope that they see, and I hope that they can find that the men and women who once put on a uniform and swore to sacrifice everything for this place, I hope that they find that it didn't stop. The sacrifice and the commitment didn't end when our time serving the country, serving the government ended. I hope that it'll be well recorded in the archives of this particular culture war that veterans participated. And I don't know what winning and losing looks like, but I hope that it shows that we participated and we made a difference. And I hope that it shows that we participated and made the lives of Americans better, but most importantly, we made the lives of our brothers and sisters, other veterans, people in our culture, the warrior culture, that we made their lives better. Because at the end of the day, as we've discussed before, sometimes there's just no help coming, and we got to do it for ourselves. So how do we contribute to the culture war? Many, many different ways. How does 3 Clicks Media and Disgruntled contribute to the culture war? By talking about it. So we'll continue to talk about it. But for now, today, we're done talking about it. So I want you to enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks for being here.